I am here joined today by Lizzie from, let's get this right, the Association of Christian Teachers. Hello, Lizzie.
Hello, thank you for having me on. You can call it ACT or ACT if that makes life a bit easier for you.
ACT is probably easy. When you say the ACT, it's like it's a separate vowel or letter thing at the end. It's like where's it going?
Yeah, no, we call it ACT generally.
I think that makes sense. I like acronyms that are sensible, but ACT is easy to pronounce an ACT.
Yeah.
It's like there's another syllable going on. Isn't it? Right. For the uninitiated, I mean, okay, we assume it's a collection of people who are teaching in some way and have a faith of some sort. But just give us a really simple overview. What's ACT all about?
So ACT is an organisation that is comprised of Christians that work in education. And by that, I mean primary education, even early years, so nurseries, secondary education, further education. We probably have some that work in higher education, but generally our membership is made up of primary and secondary school teachers, but we also have learning assistants, learning support assistants, governors, others amongst our number. And we've been going for well over 50 years. But we exist to support anyone who works in education or even volunteers. Because obviously governors will have that voluntary role, but anyone who has that particularly Christian interest in education, generally, we are mainly teachers.
I think it's worth just highlighting that because we're not talking about Christian education, which is a separate entity, separate thing. This is, I guess, mainstream education might be another way of describing it.
Generally, yes. Yeah, we probably have some supporters and members that work in some kind of overtly Christian context, but no, the majority of our members will work in mainstream settings, in academies, academy chains, in maintained schools for a local authority. Some may work in the independent sector, but they may not necessarily be in a Christian school. And we try not to kind of have that dividing line between whether you're in an independent school or a Christian school. But yeah, the majority of our work is done largely with those that work in state-funded schools that don't necessarily have a Christian ethos or any Christian character.
Just thinking about our global audience, just for the sake of numbers, when you're talking about early years and primary, secondary, and further education, can you just bracket the ages as much as for people in America, as much as for me? Because I can never remember the ages.
Absolutely. So early years is what you might call so reception, which is kind of age 4 to 5, but it also encompasses nurseries, particularly kind of 3 to 4 year olds. So they follow a different kind of scheme of learning. And then primary education is from year 1. And that's, yeah, sort of 5 to the age of 11. And then secondary is from 11 up to 18. All children have to be engaged in some kind of educational training until 18 now.
So really, we're talking about people working in education from the ages of 3 up to 18-ish, and maybe some, I guess, university, adult kind of college sort of establishments.
Absolutely. You'll get a lot of, so we do have members that work in further education. In fact, some of those will work with adults, because you do get adults doing courses at FE colleges. And you will also get those that are teaching, English as a foreign language, etc. However, yeah, just generally, we tend to cover sort of primary and secondary. That's what our main output and our membership is most sort of interested in. But I do want to say this, we are still very concerned about supporting those in further education. Higher education is probably slightly different because there's something called the Christian Academic Network that caters for staff working in higher education. Obviously, we have that Christian interest in it, but we don't necessarily seek those staff out to support them because they've got some good networks already going on.
Cool. And when you say you're supporting, what is it you're actually doing for people who, okay, I'm going to join the ACT, and what I'm actually going to be getting from you that's going to be really helpful to my work?
That's a great question, and that's really exciting because I get to tell you all the exciting things we do. We have a vision that is threefold. We want to connect Christians working in education so that they can have mutual encouragement, so they don't feel alone. It can be quite isolating, quite a lonely place, particularly if you're, say, the only Christian in a school in the staff room. So we seek to connect them together for encouragement. We also seek to resource them with information, with articles, with podcasts, with briefings, with opportunities to get together and learn about a particular topic, opportunities to be taught from the Bible on, particular issues that are being they're coming up against, conferences, that kind of thing. So we seek to connect, resource, and then the final string to our bow is we seek to influence the context for the glory of God. And that can often be the part that's really tricky for teachers and school staff to do, to raise their head above the parapet. So we seek to kind of, I wouldn't say advocate, but we seek to represent and explore what a Christian perspective on current issues are with regards to the public square. So we might write to policymakers on certain issues, seek meetings. We might join with other groups in the sector to speak up on issues that Christian teachers are facing. We sometimes do research projects on certain issues, and then might, launch a bit of a campaign off the back of that. But yeah, those are the three sort of avenues that we try to pursue to support Christians and ultimately glorify God in schools and colleges.
Ab, I want to come back to this at the end, but let's just go a little bit back in time, which is a bit I really enjoyed doing. Perhaps more than everything else, this is one of my highlights of my job, is trying to find more about your journey into faith, because you're now working for, I guess you could describe it as a faith-based organization.
Absolutely.
But what's your journey to faith?
Oh gosh, this is a great question. It's not one that I often get asked now. I think I get asked so much about the ministry, and it's so lovely to go back to what drove me into doing this in the first place. So I didn't come from a Christian family. I was brought up in the northwest of England, in Cheshire, and I, only child. My parents, whom I love very dearly, had some struggles when I was a child, and we had a bit of a tough time as a family. And I won't go into the details, but family that lived just down the road from me, whose kids went to school with me, they were really great at kind of coming alongside us in the midst of my parents' struggles, and really kind of adopted us, helped us, supported us. And it just so happened that they were Christians. So that's where I kind of first came into contact with Christians, with the gospel. They would often take me under their wing. I'd often go and stay with them for periods of time. We would go along to church services with them. My parents would sometimes would come as well. They had a bit of a kind of a difficult relationship sometimes with church, but would go and then perhaps not go for a while. And it always really impacted me, though, as I got into my teen years. Even though we didn't come from that kind of strong rooted Christian background, I always remembered the love and the compassion that family showed us, and also remembered the message that they shared. They would pray with me, particularly if I was staying with them. They'd pray with me, share encouragements from the Bible. And then I would say, as a teenager, maybe a younger teenager, I began to think, yeah, I do believe this. I do trust Jesus. Now, there are other kinds of difficulties in life, and we probably wandered off a little bit as a family. And I'd say it was only when I went to university at the age of 18 that I felt that my life had gone a little bit astray in my later teenage years. I think I'd gone a little bit rebellious and trying to seek fulfillment and excitement in all kinds of other areas. So when I got to university, I remember thinking, well, it's the first night and I can either go to the Christian Union meeting, they're meeting together at this time, or I can go out with my new course mates to the student union. And I was like, I want to do both. So I'll try and go and check in with the Christians, and then I'll go to the student union and have a night out. And I tried to do it, but I couldn't really make it work. So I think God really prompted me at that point and said, Lizzie, if this is true, you need to stop sitting on the fence. You need to commit yourself to a savior who has given his life for you. And that's something that was quite a revelation. And at university, I attended a church, a great church, and got stuck into the Christian Union, got some great teaching there. That's when I started to understand, I think, theology. I actually started to understand what the gospel meant, how the kind of Old Testament and the New Testament fit together. This great sort of story of salvation. And I was just on fire, and just that was where my kind of Christian life took off. I met my now husband. He was also, quite a young, zealous Christian. We got married relatively young, as many Christians do. And then we kind of set off to serve the Lord together. He's now ministering in a local, he pastors our church. And I decided to not pursue law, even though I studied law at university. But I kind of pursued a few different things and eventually ended up teaching and found that I absolutely loved teaching. So I was a secondary English teacher. So yeah, I don't know whether that's too long a version of the history, but but there you go.
I
So
don't think. Well,
through hard times, some hard times, God showed me His ultimate goodness, and I'm pleased to say my parents they're doing pretty well now, and they're coming to church sometimes. So yeah, that's encouraging.
I don't think there's too long a testimony is what I was going to say. I think our testimony is our testimony, and the reason why I get so excited to ask the question is I never know what people are going to say. So I'm sitting here loving it. I know people who are listening or watching later will enjoy it as well. But everybody's story is so unique. But there are also some wonderful threads that tend to kind of pop up regardless of the origin of a faith journey, whether it's, my dad was a pastor and we went to, Kenya and we saw people come into faith and healings, or whether it's, we never went to church and that just wasn't my background. And yet there's always a common thread of somebody walking alongside you in some way, somehow, that says, basically, Jesus loves you. Maybe they don't even say that. They're just being there. They're walking alongside you. Why don't you come to church with us?
Yeah.
And that's Andy B encouragement to don't ever think, well, we'll just leave those people to the evangelists, because you are. Talk
Oh,
to people about God.
absolutely. And do you know what? I would say it wasn't even just that one family. I didn't go into more detail, but there were people placed around me at different points in my teenage years in particular who I perhaps, had sort of these miraculous conversations with, who would prompt me to, go back to church or to consider something anew. I had a PE teacher who ran an alpha course after school, and she kind of, took me under her wing a bit. And then there was another girl who I didn't really know at school who said, Lizzie, I don't really know you, but I wonder whether I just felt prompted. Would you like to come along to this event we've got going on at church? And I didn't really know this girl at all. She found my number in the phone book and just said, would you like to come along? And this, it was a bit of a difficult time for me as a teenager. I was quite rebellious and really didn't want to go back to church. But God showed His kindness and His grace to me by placing people around me at really sort of really important times when I could have veered off one path. He kept me going.
It's a beautiful story. It really is. And the thing I like about testimonies is it's God at work today in different people's lives around the world. Teachers, I've met lawyers. I mean, I've spoken to so many different people who, in one way or another, have sometimes stumbled backwards into church, perhaps.
Yeah.
But actually, one way or another, they make that choice to think, "Do you know what? This is good." And you had that same sort of experience of God saying, "Well, which is it going to be? You can't sit on the fence," because it's a hard place to be, because we're scared of falling. But we can fall into God's arms knowing that He will catch us.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a hard thing to kind of admit vulnerability and admit that actually, not only, is sitting on the fence quite uncomfortable, but it was also a place where I knew my sin. I knew my sin was before me. It was kind of staring me in the face. And I knew that my relationship with God wasn't in a good place. But yeah, that sinful inclination to want to, deny the truth and to be deceived, was quite strong. And I thought I don't want to say no to that because, sometimes it feels good to do the stuff that I'm doing, but actually there was such a kind of sense, particularly in those early days of university, there's such a sense of fire and zeal and thankfulness that, I was in a safe place and actually God had great things for me. And I think God is very kind in the way that in young Christians, he often gives that extra energy, that extra zeal, when you suddenly realize actually there is a God who loved me and sent Jesus to die for me. And when you understand the kind of enormity of what that means, it can overwhelm you and drive you to, be particularly energetic. Sometimes that wears off as you get a bit older, that kind of energy and that zeal. But then you start to learn more of the pursuing nature of God's love and his care for you, and the resilience you can build up as a Christian just by plodding and going on. And then sometimes you'll get extra spurts, you'll get extra, things that kind of energize and excite you. And yeah, God is good in all those seasons, but he does give us different seasons for different reasons.
Not sure where this memory's come back to me, but I was asked to set up a holiday club between a group of churches. They'd used Scripture Union material for years and years and years. I think it's like 3 or 4 churches, and they said, "We just want something different. It's brilliant material. We've done this. We want something new." So they approached me and said, "Can you write us a holiday club?" Which I did. We did the holiday club, and there was one particular couple, retired, and they said, "Andy, we love this. We thought we were too old for working in churches. We're retired. We can't work with children. They're energetic and we can't match that. But the way you work, we've seen that we don't have to be as energetic as they are to be able to serve them and work with them." Because I always work simply because I'm not running around on the floor. I can't do that. So I work with what I can do. And they said, "We love it. We're going back into our church. We're going to go back to children's work because we know that we can actually do this." Yeah. Not because I did anything clever or amazing, because it really was absolutely not. It was just simple. What can God ask you to do? And then we allow God to take our gift, and then he does what only God can do. And our little offering, as we see it, becomes this amazing thing that other people love to enjoy.
Oh yeah. I mean, God is very good at sanctifying us, and he's also very good at using our kind of feeble attempts and sanctifying those things and actually using them miraculously. And yeah, I've experienced that many times in my life.
Amen to that. Right, let's move on a little bit then. So ACT, Association of Christian Teachers, you're now heading up the team there. How did you make the switch from enjoying teaching and then finding yourself running an organisation that's supporting Christian teachers?
That's a really great question. So I should probably, I'll go back just a little bit. So at university, I had my heart set on being a lawyer. And then as I kind of graduated, I think, being enamored with the idea of being some kind of, I don't know, social justice warrior, and being interested in human rights, etc., diminished in comparison to my zeal for the gospel. And there's some good things about that. There's also perhaps, I look back and I think, gosh, I was quite immature in some ways. But my husband and we moved to the Cotswolds in the middle of kind of Oxfordshire, Gloucestershire area, and he was doing some work with a church there. And I did some various jobs, and I ended up working in a school as a teaching assistant. And I'd always been, particularly interested in English literature, English language. I did some of those modules during university, and I ended up working a lot in the English department. And I loved listening to the teacher. I loved kind of seeing the students as they were developing. And I just thought, you know what? I wonder if I could do this. It just felt like a really good use of my time. It felt like it was a pretty reliable profession, particularly my husband in kind of church ministry, not always the most reliable or well paid, etc. So I thankfully got accepted to do my teacher training, and got my first job in a local school, and I just felt kind of, this is where I should be. And as the years passed, we moved from the Cotswolds to an area of South Yorkshire, and I I taught in a few schools nearby, and sometimes it was really challenging. And I taught in different kinds of schools. I taught in an independent school, in state schools that were both kind of, relatively um, relatively kind of financially stable places, but also some really disadvantaged areas as well. And they each had their differing kind of challenges and opportunities. And I suppose I felt, gosh, it's not always easy to be a Christian here. And it wasn't necessarily with the kids, because often the kids would not that I would, they kind of abuse my position and speak about Christianity all the time, but they were, if you did it in a measured way, in a way that respected what was expected of you professionally, actually, there's very little you need to worry about, as long as you're framing it in the right way. We'd speak about moral issues that came up in books, and I'd say, well, as a Christian, I would think this, or this builds on this theme, and whatever. But in the staff room, I found it really hard, because there was quite an ideological kind of cloud, I would say. And that can be the case, not always, but it can be the case in many schools. And I think there were some staff that thought I was a bit odd, going on to the Christian Union. And I think I remember sort of doing an announcement in staff room one day about a church event we had. And I remember a colleague coming up to me and saying, Lizzie, what is it that you actually believe? And I explained to her, and she said, what I don't understand is why this is the first time a Christian has actually explained what they believe to me. Because if it's true, and if it's that important to you, then ultimately this should be of importance to everyone, everywhere, because it's a matter of life and death. It has eternal significance. Now, sadly, I don't think she did believe that for herself, but she said, I can respect why this is such an important thing for you, and I appreciate you taking the time to explain it. And it got me thinking, gosh, I've been really scared of kind of talking about my faith and bringing my faith into my work. I wonder how I can, the intersection of work and faith, teaching, education, my responsibilities with kids, my responsibility to be kind of neutral as well on issues. This is also complex. And then a year or so later, I'd had 2 children. My parents, who by that point had moved up to live nearby me, and sadly, my dad had some really big medical issues, and meant that my mum was now a full-time carer. Meant that the kind of demands of working full-time in a school just wasn't particularly viable. So I decided to take a step back from the profession, and I did some copywriting, some things you can do sort of, informally from home. And then I was just browsing, as you do, on a job vacancy page, and I saw that there was this organisation called the Association of Christian Teachers. And I thought, the Association of Christian Teachers? I've heard of this organisation. This is precisely what I needed to help me think through what it means to be a Christian in the workplace, to bridge that gap, and to help sort of demolish the divide between the sacred and the secular. Because, I was a very committed Christian, but I just always felt nervous and worried about how or if I should ever bring that part of me into work. And I hate that cliche of bringing your whole self into work. Because sometimes there are people who really shouldn't be bringing their whole selves into work. No, I say that with a pinch of salt. But I thought, this is something I feel quite interested in. So I applied for this role with the Association of Christian Teachers, despite really having no experience of the charity sector, as in working in the charity sector. And aside from some sort of, minor leadership roles in the school, really not leading an organisation or having any understanding of how best to do that. But I felt utterly convinced that if it was the right thing, then God would equip me, and that he equips the called, he doesn't necessarily call the equipped. So I thought, I'm going to apply for this role. I'm going to give it my best. And then, somehow miraculously, I got this role working with the Association of Christian Teachers. And I just feel that there are so many people like I was out there in schools, in colleges, in nurseries that are struggling to work out what it means to be a Christian in a very sensitive kind of area of or a very sensitive vocation. There are some real opportunities, and there are some really exciting things that can happen. There are some places where actually education is a really dark place to be, and that can vary geographically. It can also vary according to the kind of designated ethos of your school and whether there's any religious character, but not always. That doesn't necessarily give you a better opportunity to share the good news of Jesus. And sometimes it's actually not appropriate to use a position to share Jesus in a certain context. So I just thought, I really want to help here. I really want to do something. And that's how I came to work with ACT, mainly thinking about myself a few years ago, how I felt. And the funny thing is that I kind of left teaching so I could get the better balance between work and supporting family and church. I'm probably even busier than I was. But the beauty of this role is that it's incredibly flexible, and not only that, my husband is incredibly supportive, and he allows our life to work in a way that gives me freedom to, be there to do the school run and to drop the kids off at school and to support my parents. But also I can go away for a couple of nights because I'm going to speak at a conference, or I'm going to meet a group of teachers, or I'm going to do some work, on policy with other groups. So it's really worked out in a wonderful way that I'm very, very thankful for. So that's how I kind of got into ACT. But the really exciting thing is not really how I got into it. It's more, I would say, about what we're doing and what God is doing through the ministry, but actually just through teachers and their witness in schools.
That was beautiful. I do remember vividly. I did a year of schools work up in Manchester, and so we did a lot of assemblies and lunchtime clubs, and especially the lunchtime clubs, which you probably would generally group as a Christian union. There was usually a Christian teacher in the school who was part of that, so they'd find us the room, and they'd get us permission to come in the school, all the sort of stuff that you need to happen. But I always thought, gosh, they look like they're so lonely, and that was my thought when I met them. And the odd one would say, it's a really lonely place to be. Doing this club, being here to support you for this assembly, I know is right, but it's quite lonely because the kids don't want me to do this. The school doesn't really want me to do this, but they kind of can't really stop me because I'm not doing anything wrong, but they don't really want it. And they're in that sort of juxtaposition of good and bad kind of facing off. So it was interesting you were saying about that in the staff room, it could be quite an isolating place.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think possibly more so now. Although ironically, there's probably more leverage for Christians in some ways. And I don't want to, not right at the moment, I won't get into the kind of whole DEI kind of movement and different clubs according to whatever identity you have. I think that has created opportunities, but it's also created real issues, that kind of a competition between competing ideologies and competing identities. But yes, I think often when there's a misunderstanding of what as a group you are, I think, sort of when I was at school, if you went to a Christian union, you were seen as a bit nerdy, perhaps. People probably snigger at you. Whereas I think now there can be, or at least 5 or so years ago, there can be a real judgment of actually if you're a Christian, you are what culture would say is morally wrong if you hold to certain ideas and certain
Yeah.
what you would call truths. And I think that's been the kind of evolution of culture that, we're not just the kind of the nerdy ones or the irrelevant ones, but we're actually to some extent bad and morally bad because there are some things that if you're a Bible believing Christian that you believe are black and white and are wrong. And there are some things that we don't want to encourage our children or young people to do or to pursue. And I think, that's been a particular challenge, I would say, in recent years.
But it's great that a Christian teacher in school X can come along to you and say, this has gone on in my school. I don't know how to handle it. And I'm presuming you're going to say, well, let me introduce you to person Y who's just been through that and you're not on your own.
Absolutely. And we get, I would say that that's the kind of thing we get pretty frequently. I've, encountered this challenge and often it's challenges with leaders, particularly leaders kind of misunderstanding or actually misinterpreting what the law says you can or you can't do. And we try to equip them to respond graciously, with utmost integrity. I think that's something we're very keen to stress, that we would encourage Christians to act with integrity and with respect in all situations. But and we're very good though at pointing our members to those that have even better knowledge than us. So that's why we work with organizations such as the Christian Institute. There are some things that people like the Christian Institute have the best knowledge on. What are you legally allowed to do and say? We try to be those that would offer that pastoral support. Obviously, we're not a local church. We're not trying to be pastoring people, but we're there to do that one anothering, to do that encouragement in groups. So we'll have, for example, we had an event a few months ago on how to run a Christian union in your school. And numerous members came along, some with some really encouraging stories, some with stories that were less encouraging. And we could bear one another's burdens because we could share that desire to make Jesus known in those appropriate ways, and to have those informal chats, but also then pray together and take responsibility for encouraging one another in a way that you couldn't necessarily do with those that didn't have some insight into that, that kind of that realm of work. So it's an opportunity, I think, to grow together in faith as a community and to build one another up and share good practice, to share ideas. That's the kind of thing we want to do by connecting and supporting Christian education professionals.
Fab. I'm really enjoying just sitting, listening, talking to you because, I mean, my foray, I suppose, into school and education was a year's worth of school and youth work, where I had a very specific perspective of going to different schools. We worked alongside the Message Trust a few times. We'd go in and do some sort of partnership working, and seeing how Andy Hawthorne approach to schools work was great. And we would bring one bit, he would bring another. So that was my perspective of, I suppose, flying into a school, doing something and effectively leaving again, kind of. But then there's a different perspective. So whilst we were there, we would try and, smile for the teacher that was there with us. Sometimes it was an appointed person who clearly, very evidently, did not want to have the role of, I've got to go and work with a Christian group. But they were sort of, I suppose, told to do it as a liaison.
Yeah.
And then there were the ones who really had a faith, really wanted us to be there. And can you do more? And of course, we were limited because we were in lots of different schools. And, I felt that this is a lonely place. I've known many, many teachers, and it is quite a hard profession, a hard role. There's some really big perks to it, and there's some really big challenges to it, like in any job.
Yeah.
But it's great that we've got people like you who can actually walk alongside and say, do you know what? You haven't got to leave your faith at home, because you can't. We can't be true people. We do have to be who we are at home and at work. Yes, there is a limitation. Like you said, sometimes just let's leave that bit away. But actually, the fact that we have a Christian faith, the colleague that said to you, this is so important. Well, absolutely. But we need to know how to do that in our given profession of teaching is going to be different from policing, from working in a prison or working in an office. There's going to be different, I suppose, different challenges and sort of restrictions, if you like, and
Yeah.
knowing how to do that well, and others who've done it well is so valuable.
Oh, absolutely. And that's why, so at ACT, we've been thinking about what it might look for Christian teachers to kind of integrate their faith into all different aspects of their teaching practice. And that can sound a bit concerning, if you kind of don't understand where I'm coming from. So we've been thinking about how faith can become an integral part of how we teach. And that can be embedding, biblically informed principles and pedagogy, the kind of the ideas around teaching and learning in a way that does remain professional, and it doesn't necessarily manipulate lesson content. Because I also want to be really clear that we can't abuse the power and the position we have to simply go and preach the gospel every lesson. That is not an honoring thing to do, and will mean that we're not fulfilling our responsibilities to children. But there are opportunities to really think about how we can do this in a way that honors God. I mean, one of the things we're doing at the moment is we've just launched a couple of mentoring groups, called Faithful Foundations, and we walk through in small groups, a course that helps us to think about the value of work in schools, helps us to think about the child made in the image of God, helps us to think about the classroom as an environment, and then helps us to think about how we can shape and influence school culture. And I would say that that's hopefully something, I mean, this is the first time we've run this course, but that's something that I really hope will get us beyond that. We can only just run, I mean, it's great to run a Christian union, that's fabulous. Obviously, that's quite hard when you're also teaching full time. But can do that, and you might be able to do a Christian assembly, but actually, what does it mean to have something that's more integral, to really permeate and enhance like your classroom, and to shine with integrity and hope? That's something I'm really passionate about and excited about seeing, what will come out of these courses.
I'm excited, and I'm not a teacher, which maybe says something about it. If as a Christian teacher listening, or somebody who knows, we probably all know Christian teachers. Let's be honest. In
Yeah.
churches, quite frequently, you probably got a few teachers in there. Just saying, caring profession, sort of one tends to follow the other. But if somebody's listening, how do they get hold of what you're doing at ACT, join up with you, and get the support that you've got on offer?
Yeah, well, you can go to our website. That's probably the quickest and easiest way to find out more about us. That's www.christian-teachers.org.uk, or if you just Google ACT, Association of Christian Teachers, we're normally the first listed. We're on social media. We're on Facebook and Instagram. But we also work a lot with other organisations. We are a small organisation, although we have a fabulous team of trustees and a couple of employees, but we are a small organisation. And the way that we can grow our influence, and the way that we can help other Christian teachers to feel empowered and not to feel alone, is basically by growing the community. So please go and find out more about us. You can join online. It's very easy. We do have a payment, £5 a month, and you can pay per month. You don't have to sign up for the whole year. Give us a trial, see what it's like, and then you can join with the community. You get to reach other Christian teachers. We even have an interactive map, so you can find out where Christian teachers are near you, and then you could even meet up to pray. I mean, how exciting would that be? So some real exciting opportunities to meet, to encourage, and to just be the beneficiaries of some of the resources we're trying to make, to encourage and to challenge and to inspire Christians working in education.
Lizzie, thank you. I've loved hearing the story of your faith, of how you came to do what you're doing, and how God took your journey as someone who's younger and used all of that into what you're doing now to support others. And I love how God, so many times I ask the question and I'm always sitting there so excited thinking, look at what God's done. Look at what you've been through, which was hard, but look at how he's taken the hard and he's redeemed it. And now you're doing this. And it's always exciting and beautiful to hear those stories. So thank you. And just for one more time, just give us the website as we finish.
Yeah, it's www.christian-teachers.org.uk.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Did you know Pure 24/7 Radio has a shop? Well, we do. You can buy merchandise while supporting the work that we do here. Simply head over to www.pure247radio.org/shop. That's www.pure247radio.org/shop.